The names Lupe and Kuchin were acid on her tongue, a poison she had been forced to swallow for 10 excruciating years. In the recurring nightmare that was her memory, a rain was always falling, plastering strands of graying hair to her hollowed cheeks. She stood on a desolate street corner, a ghost haunting the edges of a life that was no longer hers. Across the road, haloed by the arrogant glare of a brand new Maserati's headlights, they stood laughing. Lupe, her husband, the man for whom she had wept until her eyes were raw, and Kuchin, a best friend, the woman who had held her while she sobbed. Look at her, Lupe, Kuchin's voice, sharp and cruel, cut through the downpour. She looks 100 years old. Who would ever believe she was once the city's most sought-after heiress? Lupe, looking disgustingly healthy for a dead man, wrapped an arm around Kuchin's waist, his gaze sweeping over Ingenue with dismissive contempt. Poverty is a harsh mistress, but we should thank her. This car, he said, patting the gleaming hood, was a gift from her. Ingenue's breath hitched, the cold in her bones deepening into an icy dread. Kuchin preened, running a manicured hand over the cherry-red paint. He's right, you know. Your left kidney fetched a remarkable price on the black market. It paid for the down payment and then some. Every time we go for a drive, we'll think of your generous sacrifice. The world tilted. The doctored death certificate that had shattered her sanity. The glass of water Kuchin had handed her in the hospital, a voice of soothing lie about staying hydrated through the grief. The last thing she remembered was a creeping numbness before waking up in a back alley clinic, a raw, searing pain in her side, and a note pinned to her worn clothes. Payment for your husband's gambling debts, stripped of her fortune, her company, her home, and a part of her own body. She had been cast into a decade of destitution. And it was all for them. For their Maserati. A guttural sound tore from Ingenue's throat, a raw fusion of agony and fury. I'll kill you, she rasped, the words barely audible over the rain. Louder, she screamed it, her voice cracking with the force of her hatred. I will fight you to the death for what you've done. Their laughter was her only answer as they slid into the car, spraying her with muddy water as they sped away into the night, leaving her to drown in her despair. Ingenue's eyes flew open, a silent scream trapped in her throat. She jolted upright, her hand flying to her left side, fingers probing for the phantom ache, the puckered scar that had been her constant companion. There was nothing, only smooth, unblemished skin. The air was thick with the sterile scent of antiseptic. The rhythmic, steady beep of a heart monitor filled the silence. Her gaze darted around the private hospital room, landing on a digital calendar on the wall. January 3, 2014. A tremor racked her body. No, it couldn't be. That was the date on Lupe's fake death certificate, the day her life had ended. The day the nightmare began. She was back, reborn into the moment of her own destruction. This wasn't a memory, it was a second chance. The door clicked open, and Kuchin walked in, her face a perfect mask of concerned sympathy. Her eyes, however, held a flicker of something else, a greedy, triumphant light that Ingenue had been too blind with grief to see the first time. Ingenue, you're awake, Kuchin said, her voice dripping with manufactured pity. You fainted when the doctor delivered the news about Lupe. I was so worried. Ingenue watched her, every cell in her body screaming. She remembered this moment. She remembered every word, every gesture. The predator was circling, ready to move in for the kill. Kuchin approached the bedside table, a glass of water in her hand. Here, you must be dehydrated. Drink this. It will help you feel better. There it was, the instrument of her ruin, offered with a serpent's smile. The drugged water that had plunged her into a darkness from which she had never truly escaped. Last time, she had accepted it gratefully, desperate for any small comfort. This time, her eyes, clear and cold as glacial ice, fixed on the glass. She saw not a kindness, but a weapon. A single, calculated tear escaped her eye and traced a path down her cheek. She let her lower lip tremble, playing the part of the broken widow. "I can't," she whispered, her voice husky with feigned grief. "My stomach, I feel like I'm going to be sick. Just the thought of anything makes it churn." She pushed the glass away with a weak, trembling hand. "Please, just take it away." Kuchin's smile tightened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of annoyance crossing her features before being buried again under a layer of concern. "Of course, dear, whatever you need." She placed the glass back on the table, a little too forcefully. A tense silence settled between them. Kuchin, ever the manipulator, broke it first. "Ingenue, I know this is the hardest thing to think about right now, but we need to discuss Lupe's arrangements. The hospital says, well, they need the room. I think a swift cremation would be for the best, simple, quick. It would spare you the pain of a long, drawn-out funeral. It would spare you the risk of anyone asking for an autopsy." Ingenue thought, her mind a razor blade. It would destroy the evidence that he isn't dead at all. This was the next move in their sick game. The final nail in her coffin. But the game had a new player now. Ingenue met Kuchin's gaze, her expression of fragile grief hardening into something resolute and unyielding. "No," she said, her voice quiet but ringing with absolute authority. "There will be no cremation." Kuchin blinked, thrown off balance. "But it's the easiest. Lupe is my husband," Ingenue interrupted, sitting up straighter, the phantom strength of a decade of rage solidifying her spine. "I will not have his memory disposed of for the sake of convenience. I will handle his final arrangements personally. Every last detail." She held Kuchin's gaze, a silent declaration passing between them. "The narrative is mine now." The air in the North City crematorium was sterile and cold, a silence so profound it felt heavier than sound. Ingenue stood before the stainless steel gurney, a solitary figure draped in black. On the table lay the architect of her decade-long nightmare, Lupe, his face placid under the mortician's careful work, a mask of peace he'd never earned. A staff member, speaking in the hushed, reverent tones reserved for such places, confirmed the final preparations. Ingenue simply nodded, her gaze fixed on the man she had once promised her life to. There was no grief in her eyes, only the chilling calm of a debt about to be collected. The heavy doors to the viewing chamber burst open, shattering the quiet. "Stop! You can't do this." Aunt Deng, Lupe's mother, scrambled into the room, her face a mess of tears and genuine panic. Trailing her was Kuchin, Ingenue's former best friend, her expression a poorly constructed mask of sorrow that couldn't hide the guilt flickering in her eyes. "Ingenue, please," Kuchin began, her voice trembling. "It's too soon. We need more time to grieve." Ingenue didn't turn to face them. She kept her eyes on Lupe, her voice cutting through the chilled air like a shard of glass. "Time is a luxury, one I've paid for. I compensated the crematorium staff handsomely to move Lupe to the front of the line. As a 3-day wait otherwise. I couldn't bear for him to be delayed." The veiled cruelty in her words struck them silent for a beat. Aunt Deng recovered first, her grief twisting into frantic desperation. She rushed toward the gurney, her hands outstretched. "His hand, I saw his hand twitch. He's not dead, I tell you. He's alive." Ingenue finally turned, her stare landing on Kuchin. "Is he? The death certificate you procured seemed quite official. Forged by the best, I assume." Kuchin flinched as if struck. "What are you talking about?" "It's real. The doctor signed it. He had a sudden, massive heart attack." She recited the lie, but her gaze darted nervously between Ingenue and the unmoving body. "Then a twitch would be a miracle," Ingenue said, a voice dropping to a near whisper. yet carrying more menace than any shout. She gave a sharp, definitive nod to the attendants. Proceed, as the workers moved to push the gurney toward the heavy metal door of the incinerator. Aunt Deng lunged, grabbing Ingenue's arm. Her nails dug into the fabric of Ingenue's sleeve. You witch! You killed him! You've always hated him. Hated our family. Ingenue didn't even flinch. She looked down at the older woman's hand, then back up at her face, her own expression unreadable. She had endured a decade of destitution, the numbing emptiness of a stolen kidney, the belief that the man she loved was dead while he lived a life of luxury on her fortune. This woman's desperate rage was nothing. The gurney began to roll. Kuchen made a weak attempt to block its path, but a stern look from an attendant sent her stumbling back. I'll kill you, Aunt Deng shrieked as the metal door began to slide open, revealing the dark maw of the chamber. You're murdering my son, murderer. Ingenue remained impassive as the gurney disappeared inside, and the heavy door sealed shut with a deafening thud. The hydraulic lock hissed, and then there was only the sound of Aunt Deng's wretched sobs. For a moment, it seemed over. But on the other side of that door, in the suffocating darkness, Lupe's eyelids fluttered. The heavy sedative, carefully calculated to wear off at precisely this moment, was losing its grip. A wave of disorientation washed over him, followed by the chilling recognition of cold metal beneath him and a profound, sealed-in blackness. Panic seized him. His heart, the one Kuchen had declared failed, hammered against his ribs. A low hum started, the sound of machinery priming. A small, square panel in the door slid open, and a sliver of light cut through the dark, illuminating Ingenue's face in the viewing window. Her expression was serene, almost beatific. Hello, my love, she said. A voice piped into the chamber through a small speaker. It was a voice from his nightmares, calm and utterly devoid of the affection he had once twisted to his own ends. Surprised to see me, Lupe's breath hitched. He tried to sit up, but his limbs felt like lead. He could only manage a weak, terrified gasp. The sound of liquid sloshing echoed around him. A pungent, chemical smell filled the small space. Through the grate beneath his gurney, he could see Ingenue, no longer at the window, but now inside an adjacent maintenance corridor, pouring gasoline from a red can all over the base of the incinerator. They told me you were dead, she continued conversationally, her voice no longer coming from the speaker, echoing from just outside the chamber. But I never quite believed them. Not this time. She looked directly at him, her eyes burning with a righteous fury that had been simmering for 10 years in one life, and a few agonizing days in this one. Your mother and Kuchen put me through hell. You faked your death, stole my company, even took my kidney. It's only fair I make your death a reality. This time, no one will be able to find a body to identify. The raw, primal fear of a fiery death finally broke him. No, Ingenue, please, it wasn't my idea. He screamed, his voice raw with terror. It was Kuchen and my mother. They forced me. They said it was the only way to get your inheritance without a divorce. He was pathetic, groveling and shifting blame just as he always had. Ingenue paused, the gas can held aloft. They controlled everything. He sobbed, tears streaming down his face. But I can fix it. I can give you money. More than you lost. There's an account, a hidden one. It has over $1 billion in it, from the sale of your company's international assets. It's in a neutral country, under a false name. But the card is tied to family biometrics. Only a direct relative can access it. Me, or my mother. He was bargaining, offering up the very treasure they had destroyed her for. It's in my pocket. Take it. Take it all, just let me live. Ingenue watched his desperate, writhing form for a long moment. Then, with a quiet click, She unlocked the incinerator door and stepped inside. The fumes were overpowering, but she didn't react. She walked to the gurney, her heels clicking on the metal floor, and reached into the pocket of the suit he was meant to be cremated in. Her fingers closed around a slim, cold piece of plastic. She pulled out the black, unmarked bank card. Holding it between her thumb and forefinger, she examined it as if it were a jewel. It was the key, the first key to reclaiming her life and ensuring their utter ruin. She looked down at Lupe's tear-streaked, terrified face, and for the first time, a flicker of an expression crossed her own. It wasn't mercy, it was victory. The acrid smell of antiseptic and cheap incense clung to the air outside the crematorium. Lupe, pale and trembling in his thin hospital gown, was a pathetic sight. His pleas nothing more than desperate whispers against the sterile hum of the facility. Just as the attendants moved to wheel him toward the furnace doors, the screech of tires sliced through the tense silence. A convoy of black sedans boxed in the entrance, and from the lead car emerged a man built like a bulldog, his face a road map of old scars. It was Wu Yi, the loan shark to whom Lupe owed a staggering 200 million. His men, all dressed in sharp black suits that did little to hide their bulk, fanned out, creating an impassable wall. Going somewhere, Lupe. Wu Yi's voice was a low growl, each word dripping with menace. He ignored ingenue completely, his eyes fixed on the man who owed him a fortune. Lupe's face drained of its last bit of color. "Mr. Wu, please, I can explain. It was my wife, that bitch. Save it." Wu Yi cut him off, his gaze finally flicking to ingenue. He looked her up and down, unimpressed. "The debt is his, but the problem is now yours. 200 million, now." Ingenue didn't flinch. She met his predatory stare with an unnerving calm that seemed to ripple through the tense standoff. From her pocket, she produced a simple, unmarked black bank card. She held it out not to Lupe, but directly to Wu Yi. "The account number is a string of 32 ones," she said, her voice clear and steady. "The password is the date of the Jiatan Group's founding. There is more than enough in there to cover Lupe's debt. The rest is a finder's fee." Wu Yi's eyes narrowed. He took the card, his thick fingers turning it over. One of his men stepped forward with a laptop, and Wu Yi barked the instructions ingenue had provided. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the frantic clicking of keys and Lupe's ragged breathing. After a moment, the subordinate looked up, his expression one of sheer disbelief. He nodded slowly to his boss. A slow, wolfish grin spread across Wu Yi's face. He looked at ingenue with a newfound respect, a flicker of understanding in his cold eyes. This wasn't some grieving widow. She was a player. He had secured his 200 million, and a handsome tip besides, all from an anonymous account that was now a ghost. Clean. Brilliant. "You are a very interesting woman," Wu Yi said, pocketing the card. He gave a sharp nod to his men, who stepped back in unison. "My business here is concluded." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the scene one last time. "A pleasure doing business with you." He saw her not as a victim, but as a formidable ally, someone who understood that money was power, and ruthlessness was a virtue. With Wu Yi's obstacle removed, the path was clear. Ingenue turned her attention back to Lupe, whose hope had evaporated, replaced by profound, soul-crushing terror. "This is for the decade you stole," she said, her voice low and devoid of all emotion. "For my kidney, for my name." She watched as the attendants, now free to proceed, gripped his gurney. "And this is for believing you could ever truly kill me," as they wheeled him toward the furnace, his desperate screams echoing for a moment before being silenced by the heavy steel doors. Ingenue felt nothing. The fire would take him, just as his betrayal had tried to incinerate her life. But this was not an ending. It was a baptism. From these ashes, a different ingenue would rise. The anonymous account, now drained, had served its purpose, a weapon that left no trace, erasing her enemy's lifeline as completely as the flames would erase Lupe. Hours later, Ingenue walked through the glass doors of the Giaton Group headquarters. The lobby was a hive of panicked energy. Employees whispering in corners or news reports of the company's stock plummeting played on giant screens. She ignored the chaos, her heels clicking with purpose on the marble floor as she took the executive elevator straight to the top. She pushed open the heavy oak doors to the boardroom without knocking. Inside, the entire executive board was gathered, their faces a mixture of fear and desperation. The air was thick with the stench of impending ruin. Her entrance commanded immediate, stunned silence. "Who are you?" one of the older directors demanded, his voice shaky. Ingenue walked to the head of the long, polished table, the seat that had once been her father's, and placed her hands on the back of the chair. She swept her gaze across every single face in the room, her eyes cold and assessing. "I'm the person who just acquired a 51% controlling stake in this company," she announced, her voice resonating with an authority that left no room for argument. "From now on, you will address me as CEO in." A wave of shock and disbelief washed over the room. Murmurs erupted, but she silenced them with a raised hand. "Our stock is in freefall, our investors are pulling out, and our credit is shot," she continued, her tone sharp and clinical. "This ends today. My first directive is a massive share buyback to stabilize the price. Second, I'm commissioning a full, independent forensic audit of the last 10 years of this company's financials. Anyone with something to hide should tender their resignation now. It will be far less painful for you." A few of the executives paled, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "Third," she said, leaning forward slightly, "we are restructuring, effective immediately. Every department head will report directly to me. Your performance, and your performance alone, will determine if you still have a job tomorrow." One brave director, a man named Cho, scoffed, "And how do you propose to fund this ambitious plan? The company is on the brink of bankruptcy. We have no capital." Ingenue met his defiant stare without blinking. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "I'm personally injecting $1 billion into the company's operating account," she stated calmly. "The transfer will be complete within the hour." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. $1 billion. The number was so immense, so impossible, that it sucked all the air out of the room. Director Cho's jaw literally dropped. Another director spilled his glass of water, the sound echoing loudly in the sudden, absolute silence. The skepticism vanished, replaced by a raw, potent mixture of awe and fear. She straightened up, her authority now absolute, cemented not just by shares, but by overwhelming financial force. Giaton Group was once a titan. I'm here to ensure it becomes one again, she declared, her voice a firm promise and the chilling warning. Meet your targets, and you will be rewarded. Fail me, and you will be replaced. Am I understood? A chorus of hesitant, but unanimous "Yes." CEO In answered her. The turnaround had begun. Under her iron-willed leadership, the company, once a sinking ship, had just been given a new, unassailable captain, and she would steer it through the storm, leaving a wake of destruction for anyone who dared to stand in her way. The air in the private banking suite was chilled, a stark contrast to the hot panic blooming in Aunt Deng's chest. Her manicured nails tapped an agitated rhythm on the polished mahogany table as the bank manager, a man whose smile had curdled into a mask of professional discomfort, avoided her gaze. "There must be a mistake," she insisted, a voice a strained whisper. "Check it again. The anonymous account. The password is legacy. Check it." Beside her, Kitchen shifted in her plush leather chair, her own face a canvas of disbelief. She'd envisioned this moment differently. A quiet, triumphant transfer of funds that would set her and Lupe's mother up for life. A final victory over the memory of ingenue. The manager cleared his throat. Ma'am, I've checked 3 times. The account balance is 0. He swiveled the monitor to face them. The screen glowed with a single, brutal line. Available balance. $0. The number was an abyss. $1 billion fortune, Lupe's secret nest egg, vanished into thin air. Aunt Deng's face contorted, her carefully applied makeup cracking under the strain. Impossible. Who could have accessed it? As they were escorted out of the suite, their dignity in tatters, a massive screen in the bank's lobby flashed with breaking financial news. A polished anchorwoman spoke with crisp authority. A stunning reversal for Jiatan Group, which just hours ago secured a multi-billion-dollar capital injection, pulling it back from the brink of collapse. The architect of this miraculous turnaround is the newly appointed CEO, a figure previously unknown to the market, who goes only by the name In. A corporate headshot appeared beside the anchor. It was ingenue. Her expression was serene, her eyes holding a cool, distant power they had never seen before. The connection slammed into them with the force of a physical blow. The empty account, the resurrected company, ingenue. That witch? Aunt Deng shrieked, her voice echoing through the cavernous lobby. All pretense of decorum evaporated, replaced by a raw, primal fury. She stormed out of the bank, Kuchen scrambling behind her, and directed her driver straight to the Jiatan Group headquarters. The lobby she had once patrolled like a queen was now foreign territory. She shoved past security, demanding to see the CEO, Lupe's secretary. A calm and impeccably dressed woman named Lin met them at the elevator bang. I demand you transfer this company to my name immediately. Aunt Deng snarled, jabbing a finger toward the gleaming Jiatan logo on the wall. I am Lupe's mother. This is my inheritance. Secretary Lin didn't flinch. I'm sorry, Mrs. Deng, but that's not possible. Before his passing, Mr. Lupe signed a legally binding transfer of all his shares and appointed Ms. Ingenue as his sole successor and CEO of Jiatan Group. The documents are notarized and airtight. Aunt Deng's rage was so profound it left her speechless. It was Kuchen who found her voice. We need to see her, now. Lin offered a placid, dismissive smile. Ms. In is in a crucial meeting and cannot be disturbed. Her schedule is full for the day. She can perhaps see you tomorrow morning at 10. From the corner of her eye, Kuchen could see through the frosted glass of the conference room. She saw Ingenue's silhouette, saw her shake hands with another man, saw a document being signed. It was a glimpse into a world that had slammed its doors shut on them. The next morning, they were ushered into the CEO's office, Lupe's office, but nothing of him remained. The heavy, dark furniture was gone, replaced by minimalist white and chrome. The air smelled not of his cologne, but of fresh lily and something sharp and clean, like victory. Ingenue sat behind a vast glass desk, not rising as they entered. She was reviewing a contract, her focus absolute. The letterhead was visible. Dingfu Company. The project title, Eastern Suburbs Development, a $3 billion deal. She was already building an empire on the ashes of their hopes. Finally decided to grant us an audience. Aunt Deng began, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Ingenue looked up, her expression one of mild curiosity, as if studying an interesting species of insect. You have 5 minutes. We want the company seal and Lupe's inheritance, Kuchen said, stepping forward. She thought this was her checkmate. You have no right to it. The true heir exists. She placed a protective hand on her still flat stomach. I'm pregnant with Lupe's son. Ingenue's lips curved into a faint, pitying smile. A son? How convenient. And you have proof, I assume. Lupe was always so dedicated to his work. I can't imagine he found the time. The implication hung in the air. sharp and poisonous. Aunt Deng, seeing her future fortune threatened, made a shocking pivot. The performative grief she had worn for weeks vanished, revealing the cold, grasping avarice beneath. "Forget all that," she said, her eyes gleaming. "Forget about how my son died. Forget this nonsense about a baby. Just give us half the inheritance. 50%. We'll walk away and you'll never hear from us again." For the first time, a genuine emotion flickered in Ingenue's eyes. Utter contempt. She leaned back in her chair and tapped a button on her desk speaker. "You want to talk about Lupe's legacy? Let's listen to what he truly wanted." A man's voice, slate and familiar, filled the silent office. It was Lupe's. "Don't worry, Kuchin, my love. The old woman is just a placeholder. Once she signs the proxy, we cut her out. All of it will be yours." "Just ours." Aunt Deng froze, her face draining of all color. Her son's voice, casually plotting her betrayal. Ingenue let the silence stretch before playing another clip. This time, it was Kuchin's voice. "Giddy and cruel. She actually believes you love her, and that poor fool Ingenue giving you a kidney. If only she knew you were just waiting for her to sign the inheritance waiver before leaving her with nothing." The recordings were a detonation, shattering the fragile alliance between the two women. Kuchin stared at Aunt Deng, horrified, while Lupe's mother looked as though her own ghost had risen to strangle her. They were not partners in grief. They were accomplices in a crime, each betrayed by the man they thought they controlled. Ingenue switched off the device. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. "As you can see," she said, her voice as cool and clear as glass, "Lupe's promises were worth nothing. And as for your claim," she looked directly at Kuchin, "a generational paternity test to prove a link to a grandparent is not legally recognized for inheritance claims. You would need Lupe's DNA, which is, conveniently for me, unavailable." She stood, the movement fluid and final. "You have no company, you have no money, and you have no legal claim. Your 5 minutes are up. Security will see you out." The air in the Jietin Group CEO's office was thick with manufactured grief. Perched on the edge of a pristine white leather sofa, Aunt Deng dabbed at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, her voice a shrill instrument of condemnation. "How could you, Ingenue? My poor Lupe is barely cold, and you've already seized everything. The company, the assets, have you no shame? We will see you in court. We will tell the world what a cold, calculating monster you are." Beside her, Kuchin, once Ingenue's closest friend, nodded in venomous agreement. Her face, a mask of self-righteous sorrow, was aimed at the woman behind the monolithic obsidian desk. "Lupe loved you," she said, her voice trembling with practiced sincerity. "And this is how you repay him. By robbing his grieving family. We have rights." Ingenue leaned back in her high-backed leather chair, the skyline of the city she had reconquered sprawling behind her like a kingdom at her feet. For a moment, she just watched them. These twin vultures who had picked her life clean in another timeline. She remembered the gnawing hunger, the chill of a cheap apartment, the phantom ache where her kidney used to be a kidney she'd sold for a man who was already living a new life with the very woman now feigning heartbreak before her. A sound escaped her lips. It started low, a dark rumble in her chest, then bloomed into a full, throaty laugh. It was not a sound of mirth, but a chilling finality, the sound of a ghost who had finally come to collect her due. Aunt Deng's tirade stuttered to a halt. "What are you laughing at? Have you gone mad?" Ingenue's laughter subsided, leaving a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "I'm laughing at the sheer spectacle of it all," she said, her voice as smooth and cool as the marble floor. "You mourn Lupe with such passion, a passion so profound it sends you straight to his assets less than 24 hours after his death. Tell me, did you rehearse this performance in the car on the way over?" Kuchin flashed, her mask cracking. "You twisted, Before she could finish, the heavy oak doors to the office swung open without a preceding knock. The sudden intrusion silenced the room. A man stepped inside, flanked by two imposing figures in dark suits. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal blazer, his silver hair slicked back, his movements economical and precise. He carried an aura of predatory calm. It was Wu Yi, a man who operated in the shadowy world of high-stakes debt. A world where contracts were signed in desperation and collected with merciless efficiency. He paid no attention to Aunt Deng's sputtering or Ingenue's placid curiosity. His gaze, flat and dissecting, landed solely on Kuchen. The air crackled, the temperature in the room seeming to drop by several degrees. "Kuchen," he said. His voice was unnervingly polite, a low baritone that promised no room for negotiation. "We had an appointment." Kuchen's blood ran cold. She shot to her feet, her face paling to a sickly white. "Wu Yi, what are you doing here? This is a private matter. It became my matter 30 million yuan ago," he stated, taking a slow step forward. His men fanned out, subtly blocking the exit. "The principal has matured, with interest. Your payment is now overdue." Aunt Deng looked between them, her greed-addled mind struggling to process this new, dangerous variable. 30 million, Kuchen. What is this nonsense? Kuchen's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal, finally locking onto Ingenue. A desperate, ugly hope flared in her expression. She pointed a trembling finger. "Her. It's her. She has the money. She took everything from Lu Pei, from us. She's the CEO of Jiatin now. She can cover it." Ingenue raised a single, perfectly sculpted eyebrow but said nothing. She simply swiveled her chair slightly, a queen observing a court drama. Wu Yi didn't even glance at Ingenue. His focus remained unbroken, his patience visibly thinning. "My agreement was not with her," he said, his voice dropping another lethal notch. "It was with you. You took the loan to fund Lu Pei's ventures. To maintain a lifestyle you couldn't afford, you signed the papers. You provided the collateral which, I've since discovered, was fraudulent." He took another deliberate step. "The debt is yours, Kuchen, and I always collect." Panic clawed its way up Kuchen's throat. "I don't have it, not now. I need more time." Wu Yi stopped directly in front of her, so close she could smell the faint, expensive scent of his cologne. He tilted his head, a gesture that was almost gentle, almost curious. "Time is a luxury, and yours has run out." He paused, letting the silence stretch until it was screaming. Then, he spoke again, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "I hear your son, Leo, just started at the Crestwood International Academy, a fine school. Very exclusive. It would be a terrible shame if his safety were compromised." The threat, delivered so softly, landed like a physical blow. Aunt Deng gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. But it was Kuchen who shattered. The last vestige of her composure crumbled into dust. A choke sob escaped her, her body starting to tremble violently. Her son. He had threatened her son. "No," she whispered, the word a ragged breath. "Please, not Leo. Anything but that." Wu Yi's expression remained unchanged. "The money. By Friday, all my associates will pay Leo a visit to discuss his mother's financial irresponsibility." He straightened his jacket. The matter settled in his mind. As he turned to leave, he finally acknowledged Ingenue with a curt, almost respectful nod, a silent recognition of power from one predator to another. Then he and his men were gone, the heavy doors clicking shut behind them, sealing the two women in a tomb of their own making. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by Kuchen's ragged, terrified breaths. Aunt Deng stared at her, her face a canvas of dawning horror and fury. The lawsuit, the public scandal, the inheritance, it all evaporated, replaced by a far more primal fear. "You foolish girl," Aunt Deng finally shrieked, her voice cracking. 30 million, you borrowed from a monster like Yi. You've ruined us. You'd endangered my grandson. She lunged at Kuchen, grabbing her arm. "What have you done?" In Jane you watched them. A profound, chilling quiet settling in her soul. She saw it all with perfect clarity. The backstabbing, the whispered accusations, the slow, agonizing process of them turning on each other as they were dragged down into the abyss they had so carefully prepared for her. She remembered standing in the rain outside this very building after they had cast her out, penniless and broken. She remembered the cold terror of the loan sharks they had sent after her in her previous life. She remembered the profound loneliness of a world that believed her to be worthless. Now, she felt none of that, only a grim, hollow satisfaction. This wasn't just about reclaiming her company or her fortune. It was about forcing them to taste the same helplessness, the same bone-deep dread that had been her constant companion for 10 long years. Justice wasn't about being the better person. It was about balance. With a soft chime, she pressed a button on her intercom. "Security, please escort Ms. Deng and Ms. Kuchen out of the building. They are no longer welcome here." Kuchen fell to her knees, a face streaked with tears, a desperate plea forming on her lips. But Ingenue had already turned her chair away from them, her gaze fixed on the endless city below. She didn't need to watch them be dragged away. She didn't need to hear their final curses or pleas. The storm had passed. The ghosts were silent. In the reflection on the vast pane of glass, she saw not the haunted girl who had died once before, but the woman who had clawed her way back from the grave to reclaim not just her life, but her peace. And in the quiet hum of her office, high above the world, Ingenue was finally, completely, free.